Hi, very quick pre-video announcement. In case you haven't heard yet, I am hosting a book club in London. We'll be reading and talking about The Song of Achilles. It's taking place in Shoreditch on December 4th, 7 p.m. More info and link in the description. All right, onto the video. Hi! I'm back with another episode of Jobs in Publishing. This week we're discussing editorial.
Hi, I'm Eishar. I am currently editorial director at Nightsoul. We're an independent publishing company that focuses on publishing inclusive voices. And before that, I was an assistant editor at Scholastic. And yeah, before that, I was at Penguin. So that's kind of my
That's the whole career path.
Yeah, that's my CV.
We'd never met when you were at Penguin, right?
No, we didn't.
But we met when you were at, I was at the blogger event.
Yes, at Scholastic.
Maybe 2 years back or something. Yeah.
Yeah.
And I remember you talking about the slush pile.
Yeah.
And at that event, I was like, I'm going to keep that in mind for the future because I want to talk to you about editorial and for you to share your journey. So here we are today. First question is a basic rundown of what the day-to-day looks like when you work in editorial.
My answer to this hasn't really changed over the years. It's every single day is different. But even more so now in my current job, our team is so small. There are 3 of us full-time, 2 part-time, and that's it, full stop. I focus on editorial, obviously, and that's my main responsibility, but everything encompasses that is sales, marketing, publicity, and that's an acceleration of what the job's always been like.
Right.
But the main part of editorial is commissioning and acquiring. So that's basically going out, finding new authors and new illustrators and signing up their books and publishing them, and often via agents, sometimes not, and then making the finished project happen.
What are some steps in that process that you can kind of talk people through if they have no idea how a book goes from manuscript to being published?
The most traditional way is that you get a new submission from an agent, and that's basically an agent emailing you a manuscript that of an author they've signed up, and they send it to you as an editor, and they just say, we think this would be right for you, with a pitch. And then you read it, you decide, you look at several things, if it's right for your list, where you work, what is already being published there, what the tone is.
So it's not always I like it, so I'm going to publish it. You really have to...
it
has to fit into many different ways. Yeah,
you have to think about because you're reading an unfinished raw form thing, and you have to think about what the final book is going to look like. What's the positioning going to be like? Where would it be? If it was on a shelf in Waterstones, what would be next to it? And if you can't nail that down in your head, then you're not the right editor for it,
right?
Because you can't see the finished book and then champion it.
And it doesn't mean that it won't get published, but it might just go to someone else.
Yeah, exactly. And then there's a lot of other things to look at. Is the writing. Is it rusty but with some work? It could be amazing. What's the potential that's in this probably quite unfinished manuscript?
Yeah.
Do you think that a different character should be doing a different thing? Should a plot point be changed? Then you think about what editorial notes would I give, and then the next step is, if you like it, we're assuming that we like it. If you like it, then you send an email to the agent, make an offer, and to do that, as a general rule in publishing, you need to get sign off. So you need to get sign off from your team. So whoever the head of editorial is, that's currently me. Yeah. But I would then
email yourself.
I would pitch it to the rest of my team to make sure they're on board. So everyone that would have a hand in it. And then sales and marketing and publicity, especially in bigger publishers, all need to have a read, have a think about how they would then work with the book.
Right.
Yeah, and then you make the offer. And then we're also going to assume that no one else is offering for this book, so there'll be no complicated situations.
Because sometimes you can go into a full-on bidding
session.
Yeah.
But then usually what the next step is to meet the author, to figure out if the author likes your vision for the book. Do you understand the vision that the author has for their book? Do you get on? What editor-author relationship are you going to have? It's just always better to get to know someone face to face than over an email.
Definitely, yeah.
And then hopefully they want to work with you, you want to work with them. The agent signs up the book, and then you go into the publishing side of what the process is.
Yes.
So edits, however long that takes, which could be a long time.
And so that is a constant back and forth. Is it 1 or 2 really big rounds and then little details? How does that work?
So it would be 1 or 2 or 3 big rounds. The first one is all the things that you discussed initially or that you looked at.
And could that be these 10 chapters have to go?
So that would be a big structural thing if that assumes that you're changing a big plot point, right? So then it's character development, the real nitty gritty that the author's already been doing the whole time they've been writing.
Yeah.
That's what you want them to keep doing while they're in that frame of mind for the first edit. And then they'll send it back to you in however long you've given them, hopefully. And then the next stage will be the same but lesser, and it basically keeps getting less and less until you're line editing, which is just line by line, checking for typos, checking that it makes sense. And then after that, it would be going to copy editing and proofreading, which need to be done by separate people, because you can't proofread something you've read 7 times already. And that's like on the editorial side, but meanwhile, you're also sending it to marketing, making a plan with them, making a plan with publicity, sending it to sales when it's been probably after a couple of edits so they can share it with their retailers. Sorting out a schedule with production.
So you work with the whole team.
Yeah, so you're basically the middle person coordinating everything and making sure the author is happy and okay.
And so also with things like the cover comes through, you're the person who passes it on to the agent and the author and things
so
like
you're
that.
the in-between contact, which is good because the author and agent are familiar with you. And with the cover you'll have briefed it, you'll have sent a synopsis, you'll have thought about, what do we want this to maybe look like, or what's out there that this could look good next to on the shelf. So you're thinking about all those things basically in the time that the author's doing the edits, and then when they send it back to you, they have your sole attention. So it's a bit of a balancing act. And then also, so this is one book, and then you're doing like 3 or 4 books at the same time, or more actually.
Because I think you've already mentioned a lot of things that maybe people wouldn't have thought initially is part of the role of an editor, like briefing the cover, even just, I think very often people think, you get the manuscript and you work on that, but that relationship with the author is a massive part of it as well. I'm always curious about what the most fun part of your job is and what the hardest or least fun part of your job is.
I'm 2 months in to my job, so every day is actually, it sounds so cheesy, but every day is fun. It is amazing. But every day is also really different. So I think the most fun thing at the moment, actually the consistent most fun thing throughout being an editorial has always been meeting authors and building relationships with authors and agents, and receiving that like manuscript in its raw form, like I mentioned earlier,
and being able to read it and be like one of the first people who gets to read
and
it
be
as
like,
well.
can we do this? Like, is this for us? And that feeling of like falling in love with a manuscript.
Yeah.
That is the best thing about being an editor. Is like you do envision it, and then you become so invested that it is amazing that you just have this thing that someone's trusted you with, that they've worked so hard on, and then you can like make it into a real book. And my other favourite thing on the other end of that is when it's a real book and you see like
holding
the reactions to it, and you're like, oh my god, we did this, and you send it to the author, and it's like often it's their dream to be published. So those are like the best bits. And also just like being in a new role and getting to know a new list, and like our focus is like different to the rest of publishing as well. Like it's on representation and inclusivity, and that's also something that's really refreshing. In terms of like the job itself day to day, I don't think there's anything that I'd be like, oh, I don't want to do that.
Okay, yeah.
But in terms of the industry, there's a lot of, I think now especially, I do feel like it's extra challenging to put across our message and say, we're trying to do this thing, and then having to explain it, like again and again.
And do you find like you have to do that all the time?
Yeah, I mean, less so now because the company's been running for 2 years, so like it's out there what we're doing, but it is building that profile of like, as an editor, this is what I want to see, and then the challenge of knowing that not everyone's going to be able to give you what you want to see, because to be honest, there's a lack of representation, and that's partly why, because there aren't those manuscripts aren't going to come flooding in any day soon, as much as everyone wants.
So it's also just communicating to agents what you're actually looking for.
So I think that's been the most challenging thing, and I guess as fun as it is, when the workload gets heavy, it gets really heavy. So is it a lot of over hours sometimes, or is it, because I know I knew a lot of people worked in editorial that were doing a lot of their reading outside of work hours. I think it would be disingenuous to say that it's not outside of hours. I love it because I love reading, so I'd be reading anyway. So for me, reading a submission isn't any different to reading a different book, and if anything, it's more satisfying. But it is, you don't have time to do that in your day to day, so you do have to commit to doing it outside of working hours, and it is just part of the job.
And I think that's good for people to know when they're going into it as well.
It's honest. So
maybe in your first role in publishing or your second role, would you say the answer would be different there? Favorite and least favorite part?
Oh, for sure. Yeah, so now I'm in my dream job. I should put that out there. So everything's like, oh, it's so fun. I'm so happy. It's been a long road to get here. And I think the most challenging time is when you're an editorial assistant.
Okay.
It is an incredibly difficult job because you're doing something you really want to do. And most people in editorial have worked really hard to get that role. Like when I remember for me applying, it took me a year to get into editorial from where I was before. And then when you're there, you're underpaid and you're overworked. Like,
right.
The industry doesn't pay you enough and you're expected to do multiple things outside of your role, which you're going to do because you want to be an editor. So you're like, I will do this thing.
Yeah, I will take whatever steps I need to take.
And it is really demanding. It can take a lot out of you. I know a lot of people have struggled with mental health while they've been in those roles. Burnout. I was burnt out like quite a few times. And yeah, it's challenging because you don't want to give up because there's this thing at the end which is amazing and you're doing something you love, but along with it there's a lot. It's a lot.
And was there also a lot that you didn't expect when you were going into publishing that kind of made it a bit harder, that you weren't warned about it? Or did you have an idea that it was kind of going to be like that?
I had no idea. I didn't know anything about publishing, and I think the thing that I didn't know about at all was how white publishing is. Like,
right.
Yeah. And so often being the only person of colour in a room, which I know is not just my experience, but like the experience of a lot of people of colour in publishing, that takes a lot out of you as well, because then you're trying to do your job, you're trying to be amazing at your job. Your job is too much. Also, you're not getting promoted,
and then on top of that,
you're like, I want to change how the system works, and then you have to explain it again and again, and all of that is a lot to take on. And if you want to do it, you will go and do it, but it does take its toll. And I think that's something that needs to be talked about more when you're just wooing people with like the shiny editorial thing, and the structure of it is still not set up to support people at that level. And the only way to do that is to hire more inclusively. So at senior levels, you have people that understand what the job is like and provide more support and pay people more.
Moving into the kind of career side of it now, I'd love to know what your experience was previous to going into publishing. You've already kind of explained which jobs you were in, but can you tell us a bit more about how that all went for you?
I did an English degree. I didn't know what I wanted to do before that. I was like, the only thing I know about is books. That's how I chose my A-levels as well. I was like, books, okay. And then I realised...
What did you do for A-levels?
I did English, history, psychology and philosophy.
Alright.
It's like a typical arts student. I only liked reading at school, and I was just like, not good at anything else. So I was like, okay, this is obviously what I'm going to do. And then even then I was like, can I do this at uni? Is that a thing? Like, what job am I going to get from this? And everyone was like, oh, you'll be a teacher or you'll be a lawyer. Like, obviously.
Oh, a lawyer?
Yeah, I'm Indian, so it's like lawyer or doctor. You haven't done medicine.
Got it.
So that was kind of like the envisioned career path. And to be fair, like the lawyer thing is possible because I'm very like, what you think of. So I went to uni, I did an English degree. The whole time during uni, I was just in a bubble of not thinking about work, apart from like my job at Sainsbury's.
So exactly the same for me as well. I graduated and I was like,
yeah. And then I was like, you want me to... I don't want to be a teacher. I started to apply for things like blindly, like charity. I just thought, maybe charities, like what's marketing? Maybe I'll try marketing. And then I just didn't get anywhere because I didn't know what I was applying for. So I was just blindly sending out
I had the
CVs.
same. I was like, what is marketing? What is publicity? And you're kind of going like, I would like to talk to people about books.
Yeah, I just only wanted to talk about books. And then somebody sent me a link to Creative Access, which is a charity actually, that was funded by the government at the time, partly funded, I think, by investor support, to send BAME people into the creative industries at intern level. So it's paid internships, because I couldn't afford to, like, where I was at the time living at my parents outside of London, I couldn't afford to commute in and not be paid and like do work experience. So every time I'd apply for unpaid work experience, I'd be like, oh, it's really unpaid, like you're not even paying me minimum wage.
Yeah, you're getting a tenner for
your
bus journey.
Yeah, I was like, I'm not going to do that. That's like not livable. I need a job. So then I ended up meeting with the Creative Access team, and they were like, what do you want to do? And I was like, I don't know, I did an English degree. And they're like, have you heard of publishing? I was like, no, what's that? And then they basically were like, oh,
that's where the books come from.
You can do this. And my mind is literally blown. I was like, are you telling me that this whole time I could have been like working with books? Like I never, like this is 11-year-old me's wildest dream. It's insane. They basically gave me a rundown of what the different departments were, which was really helpful. Actually, that's something I would say to anyone that's thinking about publishing but doesn't know where to start. Like in your series, the different departments, knowing what they are and what they do it's like the most
illuminating. You
illuminating.
can kind of refine what you're looking for.
Yeah, for sure. And then obviously I gravitated towards editorial because I was like, oh, I want to be where the books are, like where they happen. And then I didn't get a job. I applied for editorial internship after editorial internship. I broadened my scope now that I knew that industry existed. I went on, I had bookmarked all the publisher's website, the bookseller jobs page.
So you're doing everything that you were told to do.
I was applying for every single possible editorial assistant vacancy, editorial temping in a different, like as a receptionist, and I didn't get a single interview. I didn't even get like an initial HR interview.
Wow.
So this was like a good 4 or 5 months, and I was like, this is not happening. And creative access were like, I think you should try a different department. What about rights?
Yeah.
And I was like, I don't know what that is. Like, you said it's to do with translation. First I thought it was contracts, and I was like, I don't know anything about law, and I just felt like, why is this for me? And then they explained what it was. I did more research, and I was like, okay, it's okay to like shelve this dream for a minute to get a foot in the door, which is what a lot of people have to do in publishing, is you have your end goal and you start somewhere else.
Because editorial's so popular as well. It must be the most applied for, right? Out of everything in publishing.
So at the time I was like, okay, rights, I can do this. Ended up interviewing for a rights intern role in the children's team at Penguin Random House, which at the time was merged but hadn't merged offices. I learned a lot about like how publishing works, how being in the office is the most valuable way to actually learn.
Just kind of keep your ears out and just see what happens.
And even then to just get close to editorial, and like made some good friends in the editorial team who were
take someone out for coffee.
Really kindly were like, oh, this is what we do. Got given a mentor, Annie Eaton, who's at Faber now, and she's brilliant, and she like was so generous with her knowledge. And I think that's what's really needed in the industry, is like if you're there to like hand out your knowledge as much as you can. After about 6 months I applied. I was coming to the end of my internship. Well, my internship was a year, but a vacancy appeared at a different publisher that I won't name, who for a rights assistant. And I was like, okay, I need a full-time job after this. And I applied for that, and they offered me the job, and then I took it to my team, the head of my team, and she offered me a job instead,
because they didn't want to lose you.
So I was like, yay, this is the best thing
now
that happened to me. So obviously I stayed where I was because it was Penguin Random House, and I was like, okay, this is really valuable experience, and also like their branding is so strong that I think like it's really hard to fight the draw of like working there, and it is valuable experience. I started to try and do more things outside of just my job, so like tried to like be involved in other projects from different perspectives. I had a really good friend who's an editor who in that team who like really helped me figure out how to like pitch ideas, and like,
so you got super involved knowing what your end goal was. Exactly.
Then I didn't get promoted for a really long time. So I was a rights assistant, and it was a year, and then it was another year, and people were leaving left, right and centre, and I was like, why am I not being promoted? And then I figured maybe that's because this isn't what I want to do, and I'm just like stuck here because I think it's amazing, and now's the time to try and get into editorial. I started to apply for jobs, and then I got interviews, and I got rejected, and I got interviews, and I got rejected, and that went on for like a full year. Like the date,
oh god, another year of trying to figure it out.
The date that I got offered my Scholastic job as editorial assistant was a full around year. I remember because it was just before Bologna, from when I'd been like sent my first application out, and I was like, okay, I've done it, I'm here. It's happened. By that point though, I was super burnt out. I was really miserable. I hated my job, not because it was a terrible job, but because it wasn't what I wanted to do. But I was like, okay, the end goal is there.
And then you start a new stressful job.
And then you think that it's going to solve all your problems, and actually it doesn't. It's better, but it's like you still have to figure out how to like balance that like requirement for, I really want to do this thing, but also it's going to take a lot out of me. And
I think also in publishing, people can be quite bad at life-work balance, and I think there's a lot of encouragement sometimes to just keep going. The longer I was working in publishing, the more I was like, I'm going to take my lunch break and not eat my sandwich at my desk for 5 minutes, and then just keep barreling on.
Luckily then in my new role, so I went to Scholastic as editorial assistant, and I was really nervous. I was like, oh my god, I'm doing editorial. What if I hate it? What if I'm not good at it?
Right.
Like, the amount of times my friends had to be like, no, it's gonna be fine. Like, this isn't a massive, like, if you don't like it, you can leave. But I'd like pinned all my hopes onto it, so I was really scared. And then started, and there's just this amazing team who like it was just instantly a completely different environment, and it's exactly what I needed. Wow. It was a smaller company. It was easier to like get to know everyone, and it was more chilled out. Like, we were talking earlier about how it was at Hotkey as well, like that environment.
Yeah, because when I worked at Hotkey in my first job, which was a small team, like maybe 20 to 30 people, and it meant I got to sit in the cover design meeting. Like, so many different things that you can get involved in. If you're at a bigger company, you might kind of stick to your specific team in your department, and in a smaller company, and especially now as you being, you know, like 5 people, you get to sit in every meeting.
Yeah, exactly. There aren't really meetings, everything just happens around the same
right,
table.
we just talk to each other.
And then I learned how to be an editor from a really amazing team who like just let me jump on all their projects with them, let me like shadow them on everything, let me ask every single stupid question, not stupid question. Like, it was...
Because I'm guessing there was still, like, so much to learn, even though you've been in publishing for a few years already.
Yeah, it was kind of like learning the same thing from a different perspective. Mm-hmm. Like, I was still learning how to do the end goal, and I still worked with a rights team, and, like, but it was, like, it was flipped. I was so relieved that it was, like, what I wanted to do. Yeah. After a while of being an editorial assistant, I think after a year, I got promoted to assistant editor, which was also something that was really important to me, because I'd been an assistant for so long, and I just needed... that it does take quite a toll to be like at the bottom and not know where your progress is, and like there's no marker of how long you've worked in the company or how much you've achieved. It's just the same thing year after year. So that like was really valuable to me, and it like gave me such a confidence boost that I can do this job. And then my focus was on commissioning, because I was like, okay, now I'm an assistant editor.
And so as an assistant editor, can you commission?
Well, I was given the opportunity to in my team. Yeah. I think it's still quite rare in really big teams. You might not have the space to, but like I was in a team that was like nurturing my talent and like giving me the room to be creative. That was actually the moment that I was like, okay, I actually do really want to do this in the long term, because that when you haven't actually experienced that process from beginning to end, it's really hard to know what it's like, what you have to do. But once you've done it once, you know if you like it or not. And then again, I was relieved because I spent so much time
working out.
So then I'd been there for 2.5 years, and I wasn't really thinking about leaving. I wasn't thinking, oh, I need to get out, or and not in the way I had in my last job where I was like, this isn't what I want to do. I was just thinking, oh, it's okay, like it will get better, or you know, things were getting a little bit more difficult for me, and I didn't know why. Like just on a day-to-day, I just didn't feel as inspired or like as motivated. But I was just like, oh, you know, it's just probably the weather, like what everyone puts it down to. But then I was like, okay, maybe what's happening here is that I have an end goal in what I want to publish and the way I want publishing to be, and I don't feel like that has changed significantly over by then like the 5 years that I've been in publishing, which is like to publish diverse books and to make it so that every kid can see themselves on page. And I think that was taking its toll on me, like in quite a subtle way at that point, but I was like, it's making me feel like I'm not doing the work that I should be doing, even though I'm going to work and doing my job. And then David and Amy, the co-founders of Nights Of, saw me struggling and they threw me like a lifeboat, and they were like, we need someone to run the editorial side for Nights Of. We're running a business. Will you come and do this with us? And they interviewed me, and I was like, yeah, I want to do this. Are you joking? It was a job that was so outside of what I expected. Like where I saw myself going was, oh, okay, I'll either get promoted here or I'll have to go elsewhere and I'll be editor. And then
there's a very specific path, right? Where it's like you do 2.5 years and then you either move on or you get promoted, and it's kind of
And then I'll be there 2 years and I'll get to commissioning editor, or I'll go elsewhere. And then so in my head I was like, it will be 5 or 10 years before I'm at editorial director level. But now, because I'm in a small team and it's only me, I have the title, even though the role is still basically a commissioning editor role. Right. So that was really like, I was like, okay, I actually have creative freedom. And also I have a team that we all start on the same base level. We all have the same goal. I don't have to explain to them why we should have more than one book by a brown author,
right.
or like why we should publish this like
so it cuts out
LGBT
that
fiction.
part of the yeah.
There's no, I don't have to justify to the sales team or the marketing team why we should do this. I don't have to like ask the designer specifically to find a black illustrator for a book by a black author. Like all of those steps that subtly happen day to day in bigger publishers like have been eradicated, and it's given me loads of room to do the job that I love. So I'm really lucky. But also it's been it wasn't an expected job move.
So I've obviously only applied for like and had interviews within my section of publishing, or just digital and social media. What was it like to apply for jobs in editorial? What's the actual interview process like?
It really varies. I need to add that. So when I first was doing it, obviously I did so many editorial job applications, but a more common thing now is video interviews.
Yeah.
So like the first step is like you're doing an interview just talking to like your phone camera, and
you get like an allotted amount of time to
So
I actually got around that because I would send in video applications already.
Oh my god.
Because I was going out for social media and video jobs, and I feel more comfortable talking than writing. So I would do that, and then they would kind of be like, well, then you don't have to do the video interview part anymore.
Yeah,
not on purpose, because I didn't know it was part of the interview, but when I asked other people, they were like, yeah, you had to do it. Yeah.
It's so funny because behind the scenes mostly it's just like, it was me like formal wear from here up, like pajamas.
You don't know, you have no idea. I might be wearing pajama bottoms right now.
We're wearing pajamas and you can't see us. And then behind me I'd like be in front of my bookshelf as well, and I'd be like, okay, this is publishing.
Yeah,
I've got this. With books and formal wear and like makeup, but like literally it's like, okay, it's all good, and like laundry on the floor that no one can see. I was quite lucky. I got to second interview stage quite a lot, which is a good position to be in. So so then I like would have an interview with like an editor or like the person that would be my manager or whoever was doing the interview, and they would ask me like typical interview questions, like what are your strengths, what are your weaknesses, because it's an entry level role. It wasn't so much about like what have you done editorially, but like I would have to think of how to apply my previous experience and rights to the job, which turned out to be quite an asset because a lot of editors don't know about rights.
And so they're like, oh wow, you have all this like extra knowledge.
You know this thing. But and then in the interview, the questions they would ask would be really similar of like, why do you want to do this? Why children's publishing, I think is another big one.
That's good to know as well. Like, why do you want to go into this specific section of publishing?
Because they kind of want to check as well that you're not just applying for children's just randomly, because it does take a different perspective to be in children's, and like you do have to care about it in a slightly different way and come at it from a different angle than you do to adult. If you're applying for adult and kids at the same time, like as a mass, you can actually tell on CVs and you can tell in interviews what your priority is. If you're going for a job in children's publishing, make sure you research like what's happening in the charts, what's on the shelves in Waterstones, what's done well, they're going to ask you what your favourite kids book was last year. Also do your research on the publisher, because you need to be like, I want to work for you because...
Are there any more editorial specific questions? Maybe when you get like into the position up? Yeah,
so in my recent one, then it was more about like because it's a very strategy-led role and I'm building a list, it was like, what do you want the list to look like? Where do you see us going? Like I said, it's a really small team and I'm the first full-time person they've hired since they started. So it was very like about what future plans we would have and whether
and see if it matches up with what they want, right?
Exactly. If my plan matched up with theirs. And I think the more senior you get, the more strategy led it gets, where it's like, where do you see this going? Because you have more responsibility, so you need to show what you would do with that. When you're interviewing for entry level jobs, it's mad, it's really intense, you don't really know what you're doing, you're kind of blagging it, and you're just like, oh, maybe I can squeeze my experience at Sainsbury's into this job.
I thought I'd researched it, and then now I look back, and I was like, I had no idea what they published, I had no idea what was going on, and I thought I'd done my research. And I look back and I'm like, that's hilarious.
Literally had no idea. But they know that you have no idea. Yeah. But like, when you just get confidence with knowing that you know what the job is. Like now, I don't have to research the market, like I know about the market, and all of that stuff just comes with time and experience.
What's been one or multiple of like your highlights of your career?
The first book I commissioned, which I have here.
Show and tell.
This is Oh My Gods by Alexandra Shepherd, who is amazing. You should definitely read this book. Obviously, I'm completely biased.
Can you give a quick pitch? What's it about?
Yeah, so it's about a teenager called Helen. She moves in with her dad in North London, and he is Zeus. So she's actually half mortal and half like Greek goddess. They basically live in total secrecy, and she needs to keep the secret, but she also needs to make friends at school and, you know, live her life, and she meets a boy.
Teenager.
And all of those things. This is really good back cover copy. Who wrote this? Like I was saying earlier, commissioning from beginning to end. Like this was one of those, and it was amazing. It was so satisfying. I was lucky to work with like a brilliant author as well, who's like really nice and like lovely and loves Beyonce as much as I do. So yeah, it was a real joy. My other proudest moment is probably now having the opportunity to work at KO and build the list that I think publishing really needs at the moment. One of the books that Knights of are published is High Rise Mystery by Shana Jackson, which is the UK's first kid detective duo that are Black British, which is amazing and astonishing that it hasn't happened before. Having seen it out there and seeing the reaction it has, it makes me really proud to work somewhere where we're having that impact, and like kids can see themselves in the books that they're picking up on the shelves, which is obviously the list that I now want to build.
Thank you so much for sharing your journey, your highlights, the hard bits as well, which I think is so important to talk about because it's easy to gloss over.
So you can find me on Twitter constantly as @Eishar. Knights of also, it's important to mention, have an open submissions process. So we have a live chat. So if you're interested in publishing or being an author or an illustrator or any of the world, you can pop up and DM us or enter our live chat and chat to any one of us on the team.
Someone in the office.
Yeah, someone, one of the 5 people in the team. No, yeah, we're around. We're trying to be really accessible and make it really transparent, like you are.
Cool.
So
thank you so much.
Thank you for having me.
Doei!